Hey there guys, welcome to the Code Lab channel. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another video in the Advanced CSS series. I'm creating this video from the back of the poll I put up the other week where I asked you guys if you'd like to see some more Advanced CSS videos. As you can see here, you overwhelmingly were in favour for another Advanced CSS video. So this is why I'm creating this video. So in this video, and as you can tell by the title, we have 5 buttons. 4 of them have a hover effect. One of them has a click effect, and I found the styles of these on the internet and I thought it would be cool to share it with you guys. So the first button here displays somewhat of a see-through design, and when we hover over the button, the slightly transparent background turns into 2 lines on the top and bottom, so it's a nice smooth transition, so it looks pretty cool. The second button also has a pretty cool style. We've got borders either side of text with small glimpses of borders at the top and bottom, and then when I hover over these you can see that the top and bottom border smoothly appears and closes off and completes the button, so another pretty cool effect. The third one is pretty simple design. It's a nice little cool animation. The animation just comes in from the left when we hover over this, so it just slides and fills up the button, giving it a background color of white. The fourth one is pretty similar to the third one, except that the animation starts in the middle and animates outwards at the same speed. So if I hover over this, you can see the animation starts in the middle and animates outwards to fill up the rest of the button. And then for the last one, this isn't a hover effect, but this is just more of a cool 3D design which is active. So if I click on this button, you can see it pushes it down, give it a nice cool 3D effect. So these are the animated buttons we're going to be creating in this video. It looks complicated and tricky to create, but I can promise you guys, once you watch the video, you'll feel more confident and you'll take your CSS skills to the next level. So let's head into VS Code now and start creating them. So we're inside VS Code, guys, and I'm just going to quickly go over the HTML. So you can see here we have a div which has the class of box 1, and all of these range from box 1 all the way to 5. And then we also have a div inside of that div which has a class of BTN, and then BTN1, again ranging from 1 to all the way through 5. And then inside of that div we have a span which just has the content of hover me inside of it, and the last one has the text of click me. The last button here is a little bit different. Instead of a span, it's an anchor tag, and I'll show you guys why I'm doing that when we get to this button. So for the styling, if we head inside the style sheet, I've just got a Lato font from Google Fonts and imported it into the style sheet. We've got some general styles with margin and padding being 0 and box size into border box. The body tag has a height of 100 viewport heights, and then I've used flexbox to center everything, and there's that font family. And then for all of the divs which have the class of box, which is all of them, have a height of 45%, a width of 100%, again display of flex, so the content, which is the buttons, is centered in the middle. And then all of the boxes have a position of relative because we're going to be positioning different elements absolute inside of the divs or the buttons. And then as you can see here, for the boxes, they all have a different color background. And then the general style, which is the BTN, which is applied to all of the boxes, have a line height of 70 pixels, a height of 70 pixels, text is to the center, width of the buttons is 250 pixels, cursor pointer, and the font size is 30 pixels. So that is the structure of the HTML, and then just the basic styles for all of our buttons and their backgrounds. So we'll create the first button here, which is this hover effect, and I've opened it up in Live Server, so this is what it all looks like at the moment. And I'm just going to go underneath this class of BTN and put a comment here for button 1, and just scroll down so we can see it a bit clearer. So for button 1, what I'm going to first do is just give some styling to the button itself. So we're going to grab the class of button 1, and we're going to say the color for the text to be white, and we'll also set the position of this to be relative because we want the styling now that we apply on the button to be within the parameters of the button instead of the whole div itself. So that's why we're setting this to position relative. And then what I'm going to first do is create the lines. So we're going to grab the BTN class, BTN1 class again, and we're going to use the before pseudo element, which is kind of like a half element kind of thing, and then we can use this element now to create those lines and create that cool effect. So we'll say before. For before elements, we first need to include the content. We're not actually going to put any content inside of here, but if I was to put some content, let's just put some dummy text in here. You can see it comes before the element itself, so that's what the before pseudo element is doing here. But again, we don't want any content at the moment. And then what we do now is just position this absolute, so it's positioned inside of the button's whole area. And then we're going to say bottom 0, left 0, and we'll give this a width of 100% of the button, which is 250 pixels, and we'll say for height we'll also do 100%. And then what I also want to do now is position the lines on top of the button, so we do that with a Z index. So we say Z index 1, so by default everything is Z indexed at 0. By indexing this at 1, the lines now actually will sit on top of the button, which you won't be able to see, but this is essentially what the Z index is doing. Now, what we also need to do is, initially, if we look at the previous example, the lines aren't showing, so the opacity we're going to set to 0. The lines only show when we hover over the element, so we set the opacity here to 0, so their initial state is 0, so you won't be able to see them. But I do want to comment this out so we can actually see the lines when I create them now, just so I can show you guys that they're there. So we'll say border, we'll say top, 1 pixel, solid, and we'll just make this sort of a milky color. And then we'll do the same thing for the border bottom. And then, as you can see in the browser now, we've created the lines using the before element, using border top and border bottom. Again, on the initial state, these lines won't be visible, but I just wanted to show you guys that they're actually there. And then what we want to do now is use the transform and the transition property to create that smooth effect. Now, if you guys want more in-depth look into the transform, transition, and all those good stuff with CSS animation, I do have a bite-sized series, which I'll link in the description for you guys. So first we'll do the transform and we'll scale it. So the scale method here can take either one value or two values, that being the X and the Y. We're going to use two values here. So we're going to say, let's start with the X axis, which will start at 0.2. And then for the Y axis, we're going to say 1. The scale function, what it essentially does is just defines a transformation that resizes an element on a 2D plane. So on the X axis, we're saying we want it to start at 0.2. So this is essentially what the transform is doing. If I put in here, let's say 0.5, and you'll see in the browser now the line gets bigger and starts just a little bit above halfway. And when I hover over this, it will hover over to 1. And of course, because we want this to be smooth, we need a nice smooth transition included. So we'll say transition, transition, all, because we want everything to be transitioned smoothly. And we'll say about 0.5 seconds. And then what we want to do now is apply a hover effect to the before element, so we get that smooth animation. So we'll go underneath this comment here and we'll grab the BTN 1. Now we don't apply the hover effect on the before element because the before element isn't actually visible in its initial state, because we're going to be setting the opacity to 0. So we want the lines to kick in after we hover over the button. So we actually hover on the button first. So we apply the hover effect on the button and then we apply it to the before element. And then what we want to say is opacity to be 1 so we can see it, and then the transform. So we grab the scale function again, and actually I want the lines to start at 0.2, not halfway. So they're almost at the beginning, and then we want them to scale all the way up to 1, and on the y-axis 2. So what I'm going to do now is uncomment out the opacity for its initial state, and then when I hover over this button, we should get that smooth animation. So I'll uncomment opacity so we can't see the lines, and then I'll go over to the browser now, and if I hover over the buttons, you see we get that smooth animation like we do in the original button. So a pretty cool effect. Now what we need to do is just create that transparent background for the button there. So we'll go underneath the hover before there, and we'll grab the BTN again, or BTN 1, then we'll grab the after pseudo element. And what we'll do, we'll apply some content to this too. Well, we won't give it any content, but we need to use the content property when we're using the before or after pseudo element. Position this absolute inside of the button there. We'll say bottom 0, left 0, width 100%. And we'll also do the height 100%. And then for the Z index, we'll also give this a Z index of 1 because we want it to sit on top of the button. And then what I'm going to do is give this a background color. We're going to give it an RGBA value, because the good thing about the RGBA value is that it gives us the alpha property, which can mean that we can make our color more transparent. So we'll say RGBA, and then we'll set, and then for red we'll have 255, 255 for green, 255 for blue, and then for the alpha we'll say let's say 0.1, and as you can see now, it's giving us that transparent background. If I went up to, let's say, 6, you can see it's less transparent. So that's how the alpha property works in the RGBA function, and we'll just set this to 1, so it's nice and transparent. And then what we need to do now is apply a hover effect to the after pseudo element. So we'll go underneath the after here, grab the BTN1 class, hover effect first, and then on the after pseudo element. And then what we want is the opacity to be 0 because we want it to disappear, but we want to create a smooth transition with this. So we'll say transform, and we'll use scale again. On the x-axis we'll say 0.2, and then for the y-axis we'll say 1. And what should happen now if I hover over this transparent background should disappear, and then the line should reappear. So as you can see, it's working there, and all I need to do is just make this smooth. So we're going to go inside the after pseudo element again, grab the transition property, and we'll say all, and we'll say about 0.3 seconds. And that now should really complete the hover effect there. So if I hover over this now, you can see we're now getting a nice transition, a nice smooth cool effect with this button. And what I also want to do, actually, if we take a look at the original, you can see that the letters have a bit more space in, so they also have an effect. So to do that, I'm just going to grab this span inside of the BTN1 class, and we're going to say transition all, say about 0.3 seconds. And what we want to transition is the span with the hover effect, and what we want to affect is the property of the letter spacing. So we want to say letter spacing, and when we hover over this, the letters should have about 2 pixels space between them. So if we hover over this now, you can see that 2 pixel I've just included inside the hover effect. So this now looks exactly like the original. So that's how we can create the first button in this video. So not too difficult to create. All we really needed was the before and after pseudo element. Now for the second button, I'm just going to go underneath all of this styling here and just put a comment for button 2, and I'm first going to grab the BTN2 class, apply a position relative to this, because we're going to be placing the pseudo after element absolute inside of the BTN2 class. So what I want to do now is actually apply a border of solid 2 pixels black around the whole button, so you can see it here. So this is actually the final phase of that hover effect. Now I want to grab the class of BTN2 again, and then apply a after pseudo element. So the first thing we want to do here is apply the content property, but not actually put any content inside of it. Position this absolute inside of our BTN2, and then let's give this a background of blue so we can actually see this. In the end this is going to be white, but I just want to show you guys how this is all going to work. So from the left, give this a value of 6 pixels, and then from the top I want to apply a negative value here because I want to push it slightly up 2 pixels, and I'll show you guys why I'm doing that in just a moment. And then we're just going to apply a width here of 100%, height of 100%. So we should be able to see our blue pseudo element here. So as you can see in the browser now, that's what the element looks like at the moment. Now the reason I've positioned this left 6 pixels and top 6 pixels is because I want this element here to actually sit above the top and the bottom line, or almost the top and the bottom line. So if you take a look at the original design, you can see that you can still see parts of the top and bottom line. So to do that, we're going to need to affect the width and height, and we need to use the calc function. So I'm going to grab the calc function here for the width, brackets, we've got, still want it to be 100%, but we want to take away 12 pixels because we've applied 6 pixels here. And if I take away 12 pixels, you can see now it's even on the left and right because the pseudo element was going over the line here by an extra 6 pixels. So take away 6 pixels, puts it on the line, and take away an extra 6 pixels makes it even to the left side. Now what we want to do is add some pixels to the height of this so it sits above the line here. So again, we grab the calc function, height 100%, but we is add 4 pixels. And again, the reason we're doing this is because I've pushed it up 2 pixels by using a negative value here. So we want to add 2 pixels to bring it to the line, and then an extra 2 pixels to put it over the line. and then all I need to do now is just change the color of this to white. And if we head over to the original design, you can see we're getting the exact same lines as the original. So all we need to do now is apply that hover effect. So we'll go back to our after pseudo element here, and we're going to grab the transform property, use scale on the x-axis this time, and we'll set this to 1. And we want to make a smooth transition here, 0.5 seconds, ease in out, and then we'll apply a hover effect to this. So we grab the btn 2 class, put the hover class on the btn 2 class, grab the after pseudo element, and then the transform, we want this to be on the x-axis, scale x to 0, so it essentially disappears. And then what I also want to do is grab the span, which is the content inside of the btn class, so we can initially see that content. So we set the z index of this to be 1, position relative, so you can see the content now. And if I hover over this, it should create the same effect that we created in the original design. And as you can see, this is working perfectly, and it looks like the exact same design in our original browser. Now for the third button here, which is the effect of where the animation comes in from the left, this is actually really simple to create. So I'll just go underneath the button here, and we'll say button 3, and all we need to do is just grab the class of btn3, and then let's give this a border of solid 2 pixels of white. Make the color of the text white as well. And then what we need to do now to create that effect is use a box shadow. So we'll say box shadow, we'll say inset. So what this does is set the box shadow inside of the button instead of outside. So the next thing we need to do here is apply values for the top, the right, the left, and the bottom. So we'll just say 0, 0 at the moment. And we'll say the color of the box shadow, we want it to be white. So currently right now we won't be able to see this box shadow. We'll only be able to see it when we use the hover effect in just a moment. But what we also need to do is just apply a transition here. So this is a nice smooth transition. So we'll say about 0.3 seconds, ease in out. So to create the effect now, we just need to use the hover class. So we grab the btn3 class again, and apply a hover to this. And the thing we want to apply the effect to is the actual box shadow. So we'll grab the box shadow property again, and we'll use the inset because we want the shadow to appear inside of the button, not outside. And the way this is going to work now is these 4 values here, again, the left, the top, the right, and the bottom. And we want the shadow to come in from the left, or the original design, if you take a look, comes in from the left. So we want the shadow to span across the whole width of the button, which is 250 pixels. So as the first value is 0 and it's left, we're going to say for this hover effect, we want the value to be 250 pixels. And then from the top, the right, and the bottom, we don't want any shadow to appear. We only want it to come in from the left. And again, we want the color of this to be white. And then we'll just change the color of the text to be red so we can see the text. And we'll just also apply a cursor pointer. And what should happen now is that the box shadow should come in from the left and create a nice hover effect. And as you can see, it's working perfectly, and it looks exactly the same as the original. So really simple to create that one. All we needed was a box shadow and a hover effect. Now for the 4th button, which is our last hover button, if we take a look at the original, you can see that the animation starts in the center and then radiates outwards either side at equal speeds to fill up the rest of the button. So to achieve this animation, I'm just going to go underneath all of this and create a comment here for button 4. We're going to be using a before pseudo element for this one. So we're going to grab the class of btn4, set this to a position relative. We'll set the z index to this to be 1. A border on this too, so border solid 2 pixels, and we'll just say yellow green. for the border, and then also the color of the text we want to be yellow green as well. So now let's just create that before pseudo element. So say btn 4, grab the before element content. We don't want anything inside of the content. The position is going to be absolute, and we'll say top 0, bottom 0, and then this is how the animation is going to start in the middle. So what we say is left 50%, then right 50%. And now what this is essentially doing is placing our before pseudo element here to the center, because it's pushing the element 50% to the left and 50% to the right, which will push it to the center. And then we also want to set the opacity to 0, because we don't want to be able to see it before we hover it. We want the initial state to be as it is right now. And then the next thing we're going to do is apply a background color, which is going to be yellow green. And then what we want to do now is apply a hover class to the before element here. So btn 4 hover on the before pseudo element. So we want the transition of this to be all 0.5 seconds, and then ease in out. This is now when we take the left and the right properties to 0, so the animation then protrudes outwards at the exact same speed. So we say left 0, right 0, then the opacity to be 1, so we can actually see the before element. And then we'll also set this z index to -1. And what should happen now is that the animation should be working perfectly fine. And as you can see, it is, so it looks pretty good. And we need to change the color of the text here, so we'll do that. So to do that, just going to grab the btn 4 class, and we'll apply a hover effect to this. And then just say for the color, we want it to be purple. So if we hover over this now, you can see that the animation is working exactly as it should. So if we look at the example, you can see it's exactly the same. So that's it for all of the hover animations. We're now going to be doing the click effect or click animation, which is this button here. So if we hover over this button and we click on it, you see it pushes down and it just gives it like a nice 3D look. So again, pretty simple to create. So we'll just go back to our original, go underneath the button for styling, put a button here for button 5. So the HTML is a little bit different. So we've still got 2 divs, so a div within a div, but the class is a little bit different. So we've got a class of button, and instead of a span inside of the div there, it's an anchor tag which has the content of click me. So what we need to do is give some styling to our button there. So first we'll grab the button and we'll set a position of this to relative. Just scroll a bit down. Display, let's put inline block. So we can add width and height to this, and the z index of 1. Let's put a line height of 50 pixels, height of 50 pixels, and then the width of this to be 250 pixels, so it matches the other buttons, and then a text align to the center. And then what I want to do now is just apply some styling to the actual anchor tag. So we'll go underneath this, grab the button class again, grab the anchor tag, color of the text, we want it to be white. The font size to be 20 pixels. The position to be relative, because we're going to be using the after pseudo element here, which we want to position absolute. And then we'll set the display of this to also be blocked, because by default anchor tags are set to inline. And let's also remove the underline, so text decoration to none. And then the background color, let's do like a dark blue color, so it has a hex value of 110864. So that's that dark blue color. And then the last thing I want to do is just use a bit of box shadow. So box shadow, inset again, so the shadow's inside the button or outside. 0, 1 pixel, 0. And then we'll have that blue color, but make it slightly lighter, just so you can see it there. And then we want to apply it to the bottom as well, so inset, oh no, so 0, 10 pixels, 0, and then we just want to use this color, so you see it there at the bottom. And now what we want to do is create the background for this, so it's always in place while the button's moving. So if you take a look at the original example, you can see the background here, the background never moves, so it kind of feels like the button's being pushed down. So let's create that. So I grab the button, after pseudo element, content, just scroll down so you guys can see that a bit easier. Content, nothing. Height, let's do the position first. Position, absolute. Height, 100%. Width, 100%. Padding, let's give it some padding of about 4 pixels. Let's also get the Z index for -1, so it's sitting behind. And then just so we can see it from the bottom, do about -15 pixels, and then from the left about -4 pixels. And then all we need to do now is apply a color, so background color, let's do black, just put in here black, and there's that background that never moves. Now all we need to do is apply an active pseudo class here, just so we can start pushing the button down. So we'll go underneath this, grab the button again, and we grab the anchor tag, apply it to the anchor tag, so the active class, and then we want to push it down a bit. So top, when we click on this, it'll push it down 10 pixels, giving it that 3D look. And then if we take a look at it now, it's giving that 3D effect, but we need to get rid of the box shadow here, just so it looks like it's pushing down into this black background here. So all we need to do really is just grab the box shadow from up here, and then instead of 10 pixels we'll say -3 pixels. And what this will do now is get rid of that inset box shadow when we click on it, so it gives it that 3D effect and it looks like we're pushing it down. So as you can see, when we're pushing it, it's giving us that effect, and it looks exactly the same as the original. And those are the 5 button animations using more advanced CSS properties. However, as you can see, once you get the grasp of these properties, like the transform and the transition property, as well as pseudo elements like the before and after, you can create really cool CSS animations. So that's going to be it for the video, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like, as it really helps out the channel. And if you're new here, consider subscribing, as I bring out weekly content on many different aspects of web development and web design. So I'll see you guys in the next video.